Welcome to the Workbench. I'm Doug. And today we're going to talk about one of your favorite features of our sewing machines, and that's the automatic needle threader. They work beautifully, but sometimes you might get frustrated if you make a few little mistakes. So what I'd like to do is talk about a few tips to help you thread it successfully, and then maybe a tip or two showing you how you might be able to fix it yourself. So when you get into sewing, you initialize the machine, you select your stitch. When you select your needle up-down button, it positions the take-up lever to a perfect spot for your threading. Most of you know that when you're starting to sew on a fabric or when you want to remove a fabric from your machine, you always want to have your take-up lever at its highest point. So that's where the engineers also plan the positioning of the needle threader. So when you select your needle up-down button, you'll always see on the side of the machine that there's a timing mark on your hand wheel that's always going to be facing straight up to 12 o'clock, okay? Now, has there ever been a time to where you've ever received a message that it may not be threaded properly? Well, that could be because you just bumped this hand wheel or moved it a couple degrees, like I'm going to do now. So I just barely moved that hand wheel. But now when I activate my needle threader button, I'm getting the error code. The upper thread may not be threaded correctly because you may have routed it when it wasn't at that perfect stopping point. So to correct that, all you have to do is touch OK. Select your needle up-down button so your needle goes down and then comes back up to that perfect stopping position. Now once you're ready to get threaded, when you mount your thread onto a baby lock, it's always best to have the thread spooling from the underneath side, from the top going back. And that helps throw the thread into the tension thread guide. Your spool cap's very important. If you get too large of a spool cap, it could hang up as it pulls off to the edge. I always like to put a little bit of pressure on my thread coming off of that spool when I route it around the numbered track. Okay, coming underneath your take-up spring, going up into your take-up lever, and then coming down. And then you have a little spring plate on the top of this thread guide under your number 6. So you always want to make sure you swoop it into that position. And what that's going to do is hold that thread straight, not only for the needle threader, but it's also going to hold it in a perfect position for your stitching. Once you're complete, just bring it around to the side, clip your threads, and that's going to give you the perfect length for you to start for your next sewing project, whether it be on embroidery or sewing. Then all you have to do is activate your needle threader. And you're ready to go, right? But let's talk about a couple reasons why it may not thread for you. So to show you and give you a better clearing, what I want to do is clip the thread and remove it from the machine. So I see a lot of customers sometimes that will grab the thread from the spool and pull it reversed. But as the thread is coming off your spool, going through the threading mechanisms, it's actually somewhat untwisting. If you pull it in reverse, sometimes that thread could get caught up in your thread tension area. So it's always best when you remove the thread from a machine is to first pull it away from your needle and then snip your thread at the spool and continue pulling straight down. Oh my gosh, I know you may have wasted a foot of thread, but it'll well be worth it so you don't have any problems up on top. Okay, so to give you a better understanding of how this works, I want to go ahead and remove the needle. That way you get a better sight of view. Okay, so I'm going to take that out. And then another thing that might be helpful for you is to add a white piece of paper underneath so that this will help you with your sight as you're viewing and looking at your needle threader. Okay, now technicians have a way to go into a test mode and check different positioning. Okay, but you don't have access to that. So in order to get a good viewing of your needle threader, what I'm going to do is activate the needle threader button, And as soon as I see that it drops, I want to flip my power switch in the off position. Okay, here we go. All right, now you saw how that rotated around here. So with this piece of paper underneath it, it's going to allow you to see the little hook that actually goes through the eye of your needle. Okay, if you see that the position of this is moved all the way to the right side against this little hook, or to the left side in the center of these two hooks, then you may have to reform it. Now, we never like to say bend, but sometimes you can use a small pair of tweezers like the ones that come with our baby lock sergers. These have a very precision point to them. Okay, and with these, you might be able to get into the bottom side and then either push that little spring to the right or to the left to reposition it. Now, when you're looking from the top down, you should see equal clearance all the way from the front to the back side of that small hook. Okay, so if you're looking at this needle threader when it's not attached to the machine, you may get a better idea of what we're talking about. Okay, but basically what we see happening a lot of time is that the customer, when they go to install the needle, it doesn't go all the way up into that needle bar. And then when the needle threader hook comes around, rather than going through the eye of the needle, it actually hits the top side of that needle and becomes bent, left side or right side. Sometimes you might be able to correct it this way. Sometimes you might have to take it to your retailer. But it's never going to hurt to give it a shot. Okay, so to take it back up after you were maybe to reform it, all you have to do is turn the machine back on. And then initialize the screen by touching. Okay, now I'm just going to go ahead and select my sewing stitch, because one more thing I do want to show you regarding your needle threader. Once the needle's removed, your needle clamp is a little bit loose. So another thing you may see is the little spring-loaded holding plate that's on top of this thread guide getting knocked out of position. We talked about that at the beginning. So I'm just going to maybe see if I can simulate that by throwing it out of its normal holding point. And now if you take a look, that spring is laying on the bottom side, which could cause your thread to break and also interfere with your needle threading. So with your needle removed and the needle clamp loose, a lot of times you can just come in with your finger from the bottom side, push towards the back, and then raise it up to lay it back on top of this plate. If that's back into position, then we're ready to reinstall the needle. Secure it, but always looking from the front to make sure that the needle's up all the way against the little stopping post. Then remember, you always want to select your needle up down to make sure it's in the perfect up stopping position. Then next step would be to raise your presser foot lever. And what that does is open your tension disc to ensure that your thread falls in between them. Okay, just grab the thread like I mentioned earlier. Grasp a little bit of tension coming off as you wind it through your steps of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then this is where you want to hook the thread into that thread guide that I'd mentioned. Once you do that, swing it across, trim your threads, and hit your magical button. Success! So hopefully that helped you with the electronic needle threaders. But let me show you how you might be able to correct the needle threader on a mechanical needle threader. And now for some of you that have the mechanical needle threaders that we have on our machines. Without the power of the motor pulling that needle threader down, you'll actually have a little lever here to push. But your first step is always to select your needle up-down button so your needle goes down. and then back up to position everything properly. And just like on the Altair machine, we see that we have a timing mark that's facing straight up on this one as well. So at that point, to get better access to your needle threader, and again, better sight, we'll position our piece of paper under here. And then when you push down on your lever, you'll get to a point where you feel it becomes harder. When that happens, it's starting to rotate. So when you push with your hand, just push it to a point where you can see that little hook and then reach in to try to straighten it out to come through your needle eye. You know, sometimes you may or may not be successful with this, but you know what you're looking for. The other thing that may cause problems with your needle thread is a little plate that holds your thread after your needle thread is caught. So it would come into this area, and you have a little spring-loaded finger that opens and closes down here on the bottom side. And this is what actually holds the thread as it goes back up to the top. So you just want to make sure that that plate is moving freely and the spring is still attached. If not, it may not hold your thread properly. Okay? And then also, you know, we have the same type of spring plate on top here that we showed you earlier. So now that you've seen a few tips, I hope that you can be very successful with your needle threading. Sometimes you may or may not be able to take care of it. You know, you're not going to hurt anything by attempting it. Worst you can do is have to take it to your store anyway and let their certified technicians take care of it for you. For more of my Workbench videos, please follow this QR code to my complete library. It'll always be updated with any new videos. And now that you know, get out and sew.